Earlier than that, yes, I would sneak out a couple of times from my friend's house, and we would go meet. So we had met these two guys, totally innocent, I swear. We had met these two guys, and they would like pick us up. She lived way out in the country, so we would crawl out the window. And we would go down the road and get in the car with them and go cruising. Should have never, can't believe I did, but it was so dang fun. I never would have imagined when I took Spanish at 15 years old. And the only reason I took it was because that was the only foreign language offered at my school, except for Latin, because I went to a very small school. And so, yeah, I'll take Spanish. Well, I loved it, and I did really well in it. And I had also, got to remember what my son said. Don't say anything you don't want people to know forever. I had also met a boy when I was like 14, Mexican guy, that I thought was just beautiful, just gorgeous, just beautiful, beautiful. And I think that is where my life kind of went, I like Mexican boys.
You shifted.
No, I will tell you, I had a yard sale this summer at the house. And there were times when people would come up, like if it's a couple and they were speaking in Spanish, I told them in Spanish, I just said, hey, I just want you to know that I speak Spanish, because I don't feel like it's fair that you might be talking, looking at me, thinking you're having a private conversation.
Yeah.
And you're not. So if you're going to criticize my stuff, don't do it in Spanish around me.
Las opiniones expresadas en este podcast son responsabilidad de cada uno de los participantes.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are the responsibility of each participant.
Why Not Podcast. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Why Not Podcast. I am your host Letty, and today I have Brittany.
Hello.
Hi Brittany.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
It's so good to see you again.
Too. I know. It's been
After
a long time.
Yes. Because we worked together at the Excel Center.
Mm-hmm.
It felt good being there.
Yeah. No, it was fun. It was a very unique environment.
Yeah.
Where you don't just go and sit at a desk all day. You don't have just one job. It's up, it's down, and meeting all kinds of interesting people. So yeah, it was a great time.
And not only that, but you impact in some way to all those students.
You hope so. Sometimes you don't know until way later.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, sometimes they don't want any help and they don't want to be there, or they don't want to be pushed to do things that they don't really want to do. So, but yeah, you hope that even one little, I think kind of like your kids, even one little morsel of something positive that you may have said, hopefully impacted them in some way.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll never know. I think that's the thing about, anytime you work in that kind of environment, you don't really know who you might have helped or inspired, or who might hate you.
I know.
If you did something that bothered them, or but I love catching up with old students when I see them, because I do see them quite often. It's weird.
Oh, you do?
I do. I mean, I run into people randomly, or if I go somewhere where, someone works last couple weeks, someone's working the window at the Wendy's near my house. There's always somebody. I walked into the YWCA one time, and there was a former student working at the desk. So just lots of different, because we were talking about how Lafayette is so small.
I know.
But yeah, there's so many, I see people all over the place. All over the place. And that's always cool if they remember me, especially.
Yeah. And you were there longer than I was.
I was there for 8 years. I was the office manager, and then college and career readiness for 4 as well. So I really enjoyed that time. I had this one class for a senior seminar where the people are getting ready to graduate. And they were all, my first class that I had there was amazing. They were adults. They wanted to be there. They were helpful. They were engaged. They were excited. And then the second class I got was nobody over the age of 19.
So they were
It was
like, no,
16 to 19.
yeah.
They didn't want to be there. They didn't have any idea what they wanted to do. Not all of them, obviously. Some of them, had an idea what they wanted to do or took it seriously. But
Yeah.
I tell you what, that was the most fun class that I have had. Like, I remember them very fondly. And I remember a lot of them that were in there. I remember little bits and pieces about it because they were it was fun.
Yeah.
And I got to know them pretty well. And I always remember that class, even though, they weren't thinking much about college and career, but they were, but they taught me a lot, and they were a lot of fun.
Yeah. And that is true that sometimes you might not know who you impact.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you don't know because they probably will never say it or because they never show or I don't know. But I feel like, you do impact a lot and then don't even know.
That's right. Because there might be things that you just say in a normal course of your day.
Yeah.
But it could be the right thing right then at that time for that person. You just never know. And, I still, luckily, I have some former students on Facebook still. So I get to see their successes and triumphs and fears and scary times. But now they're getting married, they're having babies, they have jobs, it's neat to see them kind of come out on the other side, especially if they were particularly troubled at the time, because they were usually young, had a lot of burdens that young people shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And so it's been great to see some of them come through that and make a better life than a lot of people in their situation.
Yeah.
What
is it though with like around that age? I feel like they all just
go crazy.
Well, like go crazy. Well, not only that, but like they don't believe what can happen or like they think everything is how they want it to be or how they think it will be or, oh no, I'm doing it right. But it's like, no, you're not. Because we've been there.
Right.
Like I've been there. Like I tell my kids too, because I have older kids and I'm like, I'm telling you because I know, but they don't believe what they think I'm crazy.
But how did we treat our parents? I mean, we did that to them too.
I know.
Right? Like, I mean, we thought we knew it all. And we thought that, even my son, he will say things and yes, he's wise for his age, but I sometimes just have to let him experience it because he's not going to listen to me. I mean, he does listen to me and he does sometimes go, yeah, you're right. I should think about this or that. But in general, he kind of has to experience it on his own.
On its own, yeah.
And that's one of the things I think in this new year, I'm trying to, not have control over everything. I can't control everything. I've been used to kind of being that person in my household that had to manage and control and make sure everything got done and take care of everybody and everything. But now that it's my son and I living in the house, and now I do have all my animals that I have to take care of, but I'm stepping back and letting him. I'm kind of like, well, if you want to be an adult,
then
then you're going to have to start doing some other things that, to start learning. Because I mean, I only have a year and a half with him until if he decides to go to college or whatever he decides to do, then my job is to prepare him for life.
But it sounds like he's ready.
His mindset is a little bit more, I think, mature than a lot of his peers, but I haven't taught him the basics. He needs to learn. I mean, he could do his own laundry if he chose to. I don't feel like he has a grasp on truly what it takes to take care of your home or manage, I'm lucky though. Like when I was 16, 17, I still didn't even want to call strangers on the phone. I didn't want to call a business and say, are you open or what time do you close? I was so shy and embarrassed to do that.
Oh.
He has no problem. And he has almost never had a problem doing that. He's like, what do I say? I tell him he calls him up. Do you have this or that? And, and that has been way different. But in a lot of ways though, I do too much for him. So he's still, he doesn't quite know what it takes to just truly take care of yourself and live on a day-to-day basis. So I'm actively making an effort to move toward that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the other day. One of my oldest was like, Mom, I need to call the bank. Can you call for me? And I'm like, nope. It's your bank account.
Yes.
It's your info. I can't call for you.
Yeah.
You
Like,
have
I'll
to
help
do-
you.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, if you have any questions or if they have questions while you're on there, I'll help you. But
I know.
there's
He's
certain
like,
things.
but what do I say?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, what do you need?
Right.
Why are you wanting to call?
Right. Start with that.
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, do you know what you need? Yes. Okay. So then that's what you say.
You see those videos on Facebook and all those, Instagram, whatever, of that exact thing where, these teenagers, but I remember being that way. So, and I think I'm probably easier on him because of that. I remember, how I was. Like the other day, he dropped something, I think his phone maybe, on our entryway has like a ceramic maybe entry, old and needs to be repaired anyway or taken out anyway. But he dropped his phone and it cracked one of the blocks, one of the ceramic. And he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm like, "It's okay. It is what it is. Like, I drop things.
Yeah.
If I happen to, I drop my phone all the time. If I happen to drop it right there and it happened to crack in the same spot, like, oh well. I mean, things happen, and we're all human. There's not, I'm not going to hold him, I guess, to a higher standard than what I would hold myself to, and I would expect grace and forgiveness when it's something that, I mean, what are you going to do? Now, if he's being absent-minded simply because he's not paying attention, or because he's like this with his face in his phone, then that's a little different, But if you accidentally drop something,
things happen,
or spill something, or he just started driving. I haven't gotten the phone call yet, but I guarantee at some point he's going to have a little accident or something, Hopefully it won't be a big one. It'll be a learning experience, but I already kind of expect that to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And if it does, then it does. And I mean, I had accidents when I was young too.
I know.
So
yeah, that's how we are. And like my husband, every time our oldest calls him, he's like, I'm scared. Every time he sees that it's him calling, because he'll call me. He always calls me, Mom this or Mom that.
Right.
But when he calls Dad,
something's wrong.
He thinks it's something bad or something happened. And the other day he's like, every time he calls, I'm so scared. And so he answered, and it was something about gas. Yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh. Every time he gets a phone call from him, he's always like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. What happened? And that's how it is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we as moms, we're kind of the main go-to, right?
Yeah.
We're the ones that do it all kind of. And if there's a reason why they're calling their dad, then either they're trying to avoid me or
or something. Yeah, because he knows, mechanic wise stuff. So he's like, maybe his car, or maybe he just he always has that fear every time he calls him.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it doesn't ever become anything
I know
super important. It could be a lot worse. And that's what I worry about, and my brain, unfortunately, always goes to the worst. Mine goes to, he's going to have an accident and it's going to be, literally fatal. That's how I automatically feel that. And I hate that because I don't want to feel that way, but that's how I tend to
feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that happened. I feel like that happens to me too. I'm always like, be careful, be careful, be careful.
And it's not about if you have an accident and it's inconvenient, you have to deal with insurance, it's money, it's whatever, but I don't care. I need him to come home
safe
in one piece.
Yeah.
That's my biggest. I kind of feel bad that he is my only child at home. That.
Do you think that makes it more
it's worse
for you?
I think so. I mean, at the same time, I don't know because I don't have other children, that are out there driving around, and but I feel like he's just everything to me.
Yeah.
It's not to say that if a person loses a child, they've got spares, so it's
I
okay.
know.
I mean, it's not at all like that. I can't even imagine, but I just, he's all I've got. So,
Yeah.
when it comes to still having a kid at home and all of that. So just got to make it through a few more years. I mean, I'm always going to worry, of course, but, make it through a few more years at least.
I feel like the fear, though, gets worse as they grow older.
I think so too, but I also think that once they're out and living on their own, I think we're going to worry, but I don't feel like it's as constant because you don't know every time they're out on the streets, every time they leave the house, every time if they decide, wherever they might be living, if they decide to get into a car with friends and drive 2 hours somewhere, that would make me worry so badly.
I know.
But if I don't know it, then I'm not extra worried.
Yeah.
So, driving puts them in more danger. Getting into cars with other people puts them in more danger. But when I think about when I first started driving, the things I was doing and how I was driving, I lived out in the country and I was flying down the road. I was not careful. I was a dumb teenager that thought, no, I know this road. I mean, and I did. I knew the road like the back of my hand, like I really did. But I wasn't accounting for, if something jumps out in front of me, if something runs. I mean, there's a lot of animals out there. I was coming home at midnight and it's dark and I'm literally flying down these country roads and it was very unsafe.
Yeah. Well, now you look back.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I seriously took my life into my own hands when because I was always late for curfew. So I was always flying down the road, just not thinking, but just thinking I knew it all and thinking that everything was going to be fine. It doesn't sound going to happen to me. It wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good thing at all, but I mean,
does your son know
those things?
Those things? Yeah.
I've told him those things. But I think in the context of, well, listen to how stupid I was, and I tell him, if a deer had run out in front of me, like, that could have been really, really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad. And there was one time that a horse was out in the middle of the road, just had gotten loose from somebody's land somewhere. And, luckily I didn't hit it or anything, but I could have, I could have. And,
or like you,
I could have tried to swerve it.
And then you can have an accident.
Absolutely. Yeah. The horse is fine. No idea.
But then
Yeah. And that, when I think back, especially now the cautious adult that I am, because I'm not a risk taker really, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have been killed. Like I literally could have been killed. I could have been one of those stories, but we didn't know any better. And we, country kids, we were flying on those back roads.
Did your parents ever know?
I don't know if they knew how dangerously I was driving. But I mean, they knew that I was always late. So they probably assumed that I was going faster than I should have. And the only time that they would normally, I say this, but who knows? I don't know if my mom was always aware when I came in late. She probably was and just maybe didn't feel like saying anything.
Yeah.
But I do know the night that I saw the horse, I called it in to let the authorities know because I felt bad that because I'm thinking somebody could hit this horse,
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm going to get caught because I knew that they're going to know that I did this because I'm taking even more time to get home.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what happened with that though. I don't remember
How old were you?
Probably 17.
Okay.
Yeah, I was probably 17. My boyfriend at the time lived in Frankfurt. So I was driving from Frankfurt to, I don't even know. It was 18 minutes or so outside of Frankfurt towards Mulberry. So it was, but I've spent a ton of time in Frankfurt. So that was where I always went as a teenager. And, so yeah, I'd be flying home.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, that's a drive.
It was about 20 minutes.
And did your parents know you would go to Frankfurt?
Oh yeah.
Or you would say, I'm going somewhere else?
Oh no.
Oh, they knew?
I generally, I don't remember having to say
Lie?
I was going. Yeah. I don't remember doing that. I mean, especially once I had that boyfriend and I spent most of my time at his house, so they knew where I was.
Okay.
I didn't really have to. Now, earlier than that, yes, I would sneak out a couple of times from my friend's house, and we would go meet. So we had met these two guys, totally innocent, I swear. We had met these two guys, and they would like pick us up. She lived way out in the country, so we would crawl out the window. And we would go down the road and get in the car with them and go cruising.
Oh.
Should have never, can't believe I did, but it was so dang fun and nothing bad ever happened. They were perfect gentlemen. Nothing ever, it was perfectly nice. But yeah, terrible. Don't recommend it for kids.
But like, do you regret it?
Well, I know, but only because nothing bad happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if something bad had happened and if it had led to something terrible, then I would have. But
but you had fun.
I had fun. Yeah. We weren't out drinking. We weren't doing drugs. That was one thing for me. Like I assume they know, but I was late for curfew, but that was about it. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing drugs. That was never my thing. Still isn't. And so, they hopefully knew that and didn't worry at least about that. I mean, I was maybe hanging out with some shady characters in Frankfurt, but I wasn't like doing anything really wrong. I wasn't breaking the law. They might have been, but I wasn't, I had fun.
That's
fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you lived in Guatemala for 3 years, but I don't think I know how did that happen.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
So my husband at the time was deported from the U.S.
Oh.
That was in 2007. And so he was deported to Honduras because he's from Honduras. And so he was deported. And then trying to think of my timeline. So he was deported when I was 4 months pregnant. And then I stayed. I still had a job and everything. So I stayed. I had the baby. Let's see, that would have been, and then, and in the meantime, I'm doing all the applications for immigration applications and all the papers and all of that. And then, we got denied. Our immigration application got denied. Oh. And so then I received the notification that once we filed an appeal, because we had to file an appeal of that decision to allow him to come back. Once we were going to file the appeal, it was a 26-month waiting period. So I already knew, I already had, at that point, I think my son was almost 2.
Okay.
And so by the time that denial came and then we filed for the appeal, it was going to be another 2 years.
Yeah.
Over 2 years. So I decided that I had a person who wanted to be with us, who loved his child dearly, and decided to sell everything and moved. First we moved to Costa Rica because Costa Rica, I had a 2-year-old. It has clean water, so I knew that the likelihood of him getting sick was lower. And I found a program down there for to take a certification program in teaching English as a foreign language. Oh. So the plan was go down there. We rented an apartment. I went through my course. My husband took care of the baby at that time and went through the course. And then my plan was, I'm going to get a job teaching English and we're going to just figure it out.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I met the owner of the company through which I had gone for the certification program for teaching English. And I was older than the typical person that went through the program. Okay. And I already spoke Spanish, so he didn't have to worry about that part. I already spoke Spanish. He knew that I was pretty much stuck down there because I couldn't come back to the States with my husband, at least, because we were still waiting for that process. And so he hired me to manage his Guatemala office. Oh. And that was where we hosted foreign volunteers. So foreign meaning U.S., but really all around the world. I mean, I got to meet people from everywhere. So people would come and we would search for housing for them. We would have host families that we would place them with. We had them in projects around where I lived, around Antigua. And they would get to volunteer. So they could usually they would volunteer like half a day, and then they might take Spanish in the afternoon, or vice versa, in the morning, and then volunteer in the afternoon. They would take some Spanish classes. So we had a beautiful courtyard, and we had beautiful classrooms, and we had teachers, we had English teachers eventually to teach the locals English.
Yeah.
And then we had Spanish teachers teaching the visitors, the volunteers, Spanish. So we were kind of the home base. We would show them how to get to their projects, through their volunteering projects, on the bus. And we would take them on the bus. We gave them an orientation, and we always joke that we've never talked about diarrhea so much in our entire lives. But that was just a fact of life down there. Like, if you're a foreigner and you go down there, you're going to get sick. And especially if you're not careful, it's going to happen. And it's, it was just a fact of life. So we just made sure we told them, this is what you need to try to avoid, So yeah, we were, worked there for almost 3 years, and then his papers finally got approved. And so we had to go to Honduras to go to the embassy and go through that whole interview process. And and then our appeal was approved, and so we went and got the papers over there.
So your son he grew up, like he had his 3 years. You said 3 years?
Yeah, he was 2.
So he was
in like 2 months when we went to Guatemala, or to Costa Rica. Then he was almost 2.5 when we went to Guatemala, because we were in Costa Rica for 2-3 months, something like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then, so he didn't talk before we got there. So his first language was Spanish.
Okay.
Because we put him in school. He was in a Montessori school at the age of like 2.5. And that was a lovely experience there. And so he learned a lot. And so he only spoke Spanish at home until we came back to the States. I always spoke to him in English, because I was like, oh, I wish I had done things differently now. But at the time I was thinking, he needs to know English, because we're going to go back at some point. So he needs to have some sort of English input, So I always spoke to him in English, but he would always respond in Spanish. Yeah. And of course, he would always talk to his dad in Spanish, and school and everybody else around him. So
that's nice. And does he still know that Spanish?
Nope. He understands a lot just because of growing up with his dad and everything, but he
not speaking.
Lost it.
Yeah.
It was literally only about 4 weeks after we got back, because he was 5 years old when we came back.
Yeah.
And we came back and moved in with my grandma here in Lafayette. And I think his dad's naturally quiet anyway, so he doesn't talk a ton. And I do talk a lot. And then talking with my grandma, and so me and grandma, and then him talking to grandma, and within about 4 weeks, he was speaking English.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he was only speaking English. Yeah. And then he lost the Spanish. But his father has always talked to him in Spanish, so he still understands a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, nothing like it should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happens. That's how I feel that happens.
Just one of my biggest regrets, though.
Yeah. But going back to you living in Guatemala, how was it living in Guatemala? Like, did you like it, or were you just like, I have to be here and this is where I...
At times, I would say both. At times, there were times like, oh, I just have to be here and I have to... But I loved it. I cried on the way to the airport when we came back. I wanted to stay. I loved it. There were things, of course, where you're just like, oh, I hate it here, there's different things that you're not used to. And luckily I already knew Spanish, so I didn't have to overcome that. I can't imagine not speaking the language and being in a place like that. But it was lovely and it was wonderful. And I met so many awesome people, both at work and the people that would come from other countries. Some that I still have on Facebook to this day that are now in all different places of the world. It's been awesome to see these people grow. And, when I knew them as a 20-year-old, you know, and now one runs a travel company and she travels, she runs tours to Central and South America and Cuba and all kinds of places. And, one girl now is like, usually at the White House, like hanging out with people It's just been really interesting. So I loved my time there. I loved the people. Just everybody was lovely. I mean, yeah, there's, it's very touristy, the area where we were.
Okay.
Lots and lots of tourists from all over the place. So they're used to foreigners.
Oh, okay. So you weren't the only
Oh, no.
person? Okay.
No, I wasn't. I mean, there weren't a ton that lived there and worked there. I mean, there were quite a few. Like if you were to go there, you'd be like, wow, there's a lot of different people around here.
Yeah.
But because it's one of those places that it just sucks you in, and lots of people just love to call it home. Lots of expats there. Lots of young and old. I was going to say older people usually that can like retire or they
and then move.
Yeah, and it's just it's nice. It's there's safety is an issue, of course, personal safety and crime and corruption and those kinds of things are definitely an issue. It's only about 45 minutes outside of Guatemala City.
Okay.
And so, it's close enough that some crime makes its way there. And of course, crime is everywhere. But in general, like, you can walk around and feel generally safe. Now, of course, you take precautions and, but it was lovely. It was, even though I was not forced to be there, but, even though we kind of had to stay, I could have stayed definitely longer, especially if I hadn't had a child. I think when you think about your child and growing up, that there isn't the availability of schooling and sports and clubs and all of those things, but I still would have, I mean, there's still so many wonderful, enriching activities down there, just with the landscape, just with the, it's surrounded by, there's like 3 volcanoes around.
Oh,
and
volcanoes?
So volcanoes, yeah, active. There's one that's active or 2. And I mean, they're literally just right there. I mean, they're at the edge of the town.
Did you ever like experience one?
I don't think while we were there, I think one of them, it's Fuego is the name of it.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, there's Fuego and Agua, and then Fuego still erupts.
Okay.
Occasionally, and but it generally hasn't caused a ton of damage or anything.
Okay.
Now, after we left, there's one there called Pacaya that erupted, and that was one that did cause a ton of damage, and ash flew so far that it really did cause a lot of damage for the people around, the people that lived kind of on the edge of the volcano. Some people lived like at the bottom of it, and so that one was a disaster. But luckily we had left already, so we didn't have to go through that.
And I don't think those give you like any
Warning.
heads up,
right?
Or like
I don't think so. I've often been confused by that because I'm like, surely they can
feel
that or measure that. Yeah.
But that's interesting though, like being around volcanoes.
Yeah, it was really neat. It was, and there were, you could climb them, like you could climb up them. And the one that erupted after we left, Pacaya, that one was a popular one with our volunteers, and because most of our volunteers were younger kids or whatever. And I'll never forget this one. I went once with a group because I was the like general manager of the facility, so I didn't do a lot of the stuff with the kids and the volunteers. We had a staff that would sometimes accompany them if they wanted to, or especially if there wasn't a tour leader or something like that. So I did go one time to Pacaya, and I don't do well with altitude. Like at all. I feel like I can't breathe and my chest gets really tight. And so when you start the trek up, there are people that work there, or people, I don't know if they're employed there or whatever, but they have horses that they walk up with you, basically. Like they walk up with the horse because they know that someone is going to give up because they can't make it, and they're going to want to rent a horse.
Oh,
so that's what they're for.
That's what they're for.
That's what they're for. They're there to help in case someone needs a horse in order to get up to the top. They follow you. Like there might be, I don't know, if let's say we have a group of 20, there might be 2 or 3. They might have 2 or 3 like horses, and the guys leading them up there. So yeah, I was miserable, and I finally rented a horse. I couldn't do it. I was huffing and puffing, and I was like, I'm not enjoying this at all. And, because I mean, literally, I felt like I was just climbing like this. Like my only view was right in front of me, the mountain right in front of me, because I was dying. So I finally was like, you know what? I'll rent the horse. I don't care how much it is.
Wow.
I must rent this horse.
Yeah.
And then, I got on the horse finally, and I was like, oh, this is great.
Because then you can see.
Then I could see.
Yeah.
I could see what was going on. I could look around. I wasn't dying,
Yeah.
And then we got to the top, and they actually had like little, there would be like natural holes in the volcano where the lava was underneath, and it was hot enough where they would take up marshmallows, and you could roast marshmallows on the volcano. And that was a kind of a interesting thing for them to promote the tour. And so then you stand up there for a little bit and take your pictures, and then you go back down. Going back down was way easier.
Oh yeah, I bet.
That was fine. I was like, it's fine. I mean, yeah, you can still hurt yourself, but going down was much better than going up. But
It's like you just slide.
yeah, pretty much. You just kind of, just go with it. But yeah, that's a fun memory, Yeah.
And wouldn't it be dangerous? Like,
I didn't really worry about it.
No?
I think because they generally before they really go, they start to spout like a few days beforehand.
Yeah.
So I didn't. And there are times where they'll say no tours, it's closed because
okay, so they say, okay.
There were times when you couldn't do it. And there's another one that they have that there's a lot of robbers on it, so they advise you not to go unless you're with a group and with a tour guide, because you will get robbed. That's what they make their living on. The people that live up, not all of them, but so yeah, it was such a unique experience, and something that I don't think I appreciated it then as much as I do now for what it was. And, I did kind of feel like, oh, we have to be here. I can't be at home. I wish I were at home. But then I would come home and visit, and I was like, nothing's changed. Everything's the same.
The same,
everybody's just doing their thing. Nothing's different, So yeah, it was, because I did have to leave the country every once in a while to renew my visa.
Okay.
So, I got to I had to come to the States. I went to Mexico.
So you've been to Mexico.
Oh, well, yeah, I went to Mexico the first time when I was 17 with a school trip.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And I think that's what like sealed the deal. Like I fell in love with Spanish in Mexico. And it was really a Mexican boy that I met when I was like 17, but that's beside the point. But yeah, that trip to Mexico when I was in high school was just like, it opened up a whole new world. And we went to 4 different cities in 7 days. And I still remember, in fact, I just found my photo album from it the other day, and it was wonderful. So I went that time, and then I went back in college again. I studied there for 2 months in the summer. I was afraid to do a whole semester program. So I went to Guanajuato in Mexico, and studied there for I think it was 2 months. That was lovely. I had a wonderful time there too.
Yeah.
And then I went back one more time after going in college. Then I went back one more time with 2 girls that I had met there while we were studying abroad. Mm-hmm. So that was so I've been to Honduras more, and of course lived in Guatemala, because when my husband was deported, then we went to visit him multiple times because I worked for an airline, so I got super cheap airfare. So yeah, we went probably, I don't know, I think I've been to Honduras probably 10 times or so. Because I took my son down there after he was born, because he was still down there, and so I took him to meet his dad, and Ian was 3 weeks at that point, 3 weeks old, and spent about 3 weeks there with him
Mm-hmm.
during my maternity leave, and then went back multiple times after that until he was able to come back.
So out of like Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, which would you say are they all the same? Are they all like their own different in their own style? Or
Yeah, they're so different.
okay.
I mean, a lot of people, of course, the perception is that they're all the same. Right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
everybody speaks Spanish, so they must all be the same. Well,
Yeah.
couldn't be further from the truth. But I mean, it also depends on the area you're in. So like Guanajuato and Antigua, where I lived in Guatemala, but in Guanajuato in Mexico, they're similar because they're both colonial cities. So they have like cobblestone streets, and they have the old fountains, and they have like the neat downtowns, and they're kind of I would compare those two, and those are very similar. It's kind of a smaller town, lots of nice people.
Okay.
Whereas in Honduras, my husband is from Tegucigalpa, the capital, and it's just like any other big city, crowded, traffic,
Cars everywhere.
And he even said he just got back about like a week ago and said too that it's even worse now. Just the number of, because as people become more economically stable, they can afford cars more, and so it's just, he said there's just so much traffic, and the crime is really bad. The gangs are really bad in Honduras, and that happens in Guatemala as well, and Mexico, of course, but. In my experiences, at least based on the places where I was, Mexico was lovely, but I was also in a little bubble of being a student.
Yeah.
And so we were pretty protected. And we had someone, we had a host family. So we had someone to kind of, I lived with, with a family. And so we were a little bit more shaded or, protected from those things.
Yeah.
Guatemala, I never really enjoyed being in the city because I never felt safe in Guatemala City because it's just, you hear the terrible things coming out of there. Tegucigalpa and Honduras, same thing. It's kind of scary, but at the same time, I never had any issues. Like, of course, when I would go down, I'd be like, oh, wow, this is so cool. I loved it. I always loved it. I always, part of it's just my ignorance of what can happen and what you have to watch out for. And, he was always telling me like, you can't just walk around and not have any idea what's going on around you, because I had a privileged, safe life growing up and didn't have to worry about those things. But,
and you don't know, like you hear it, but then you don't know until you experience it.
And you don't know. And, you don't know what, when you're not from an area, you don't hear all of the bad stuff.
Or like the truth.
Right. You hear, or you're not aware that, somebody got shot on that corner last week, as you're walking around or whatever. So, there's a little bit of an ignorance that accompanies you when you're traveling, that you're like, oh, it's all wonderful. And it's really not all wonderful.
Yeah.
I loved Honduras, also, because we would go to restaurants, or we would go, and they have these humongous malls and huge restaurants. They have, just like any big city here, that's what it looks like. There's McDonald's and Wendy's and all of that. Just like, think Mexico City, same kind of thing, smaller scale, but it's just, everything is very modern.
Yeah.
But when it starts to get dark, you
go inside.
Home.
Yeah, you go. Yeah. What about the food? The food from Guatemala, it's Honduras and Mexico.
It's relatively, from my foreign, perspective, it is very similar in the sense of what the ingredients are.
Okay.
You know how they say, like, for Mexican food, like what does a taco have? Or they'll say, oh, there's cheese, there's whatever. And it's like, oh, you just fold it differently and it's called something different. It's always the same, but it's like, but I recognize that it's not all the same.
It's not
even close. But, there might be a lot of the same ingredients. There might be rice, there might be beans, there might be meat, but I feel like in Guatemala and Honduras are more similar.
Okay.
In a lot of ways. They're more similar with the language, and they're more similar with terminology, and they're more similar with kind of the style of their food. Mexico, I feel like, is its own thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely way different. And I know a lot of people think that, like I said, that if you speak Spanish, you're obviously the same. Not true. But there was a bigger difference between Mexico and pretty much any other food and culture that I've experienced than, Honduras and Guatemala.
In Guatemala. Yeah, because in Mexico, there's also like a lot of states.
Yeah.
And each state has its own
thing
of food.
Yes.
And so there's food that I'm like, it's Mexican, but from this state. And I'm like, I've never tried it because it's from another state.
And Mexico's so big that it's just because it's one, just like the United States. Like, there are things that we might be 2 states over, but it's way different, that's how Mexico, because that's, I think when I was there the first time, I probably didn't appreciate that. But like we went to, I think we started in Mexico City. And then we went to, I don't remember exactly the order, but we went to Mexico City, we went to Guanajuato, we went to Guadalajara, and then Puerto Vallarta. All in 7 days. So
was too fast.
It was too fast. And we took all these pictures and we get back and we're like, I don't remember where that was. I don't remember what church that is. I don't remember what city it was in, what country or what state it was in, So, I mean, it was lovely and wonderful, but yeah, it was kind of just to give us an idea, but we got to take the bus through other places, other states and such. So, Mexico is definitely its own thing.
Its own thing.
Yeah.
And I asked because I've never been to Guatemala or Honduras.
Yeah.
So I'm always like asking, is it the same? Does it look the same?
It feels the same.
Do they eat the same?
Yeah. I mean, it's close enough that you wouldn't really have a problem, ordering. I mean, there will definitely be things on the menus that you're like, what the heck is that? Yeah. Because, they just call things differently. Or the funny thing to me as an English speaker who has learned Spanish as a second language is, seeing kind of from an outside perspective what certain words mean in different countries. Like I have to be careful, because I don't know something that is called this one thing,
and it's a bad word and then
here I am
another
saying
one.
it. Yeah. And so I have to really pay attention, because I don't have that kind of background as to what's bad and what, in what dialect. And so I try not to use any slang if I can avoid it. I try to just stick to the straight and narrow and use the words that I was taught and try not to. And then I also have to remember certain words. I'm like, okay, was that in Guatemala that I learned that word? Is that how is that how a Guatemalan refers to this? Or is that Honduran? Like there's some things that I just can't remember which one it is, So, I mean, my husband and I, ex-husband now, but my husband and I, when we were dating, we got into a fight about now I can't even think of what we were. So a straw is called different things, right? So in Mexican Spanish, so I said popote. So I said, pásame un popote. We were at a Mexican restaurant, and at that time he didn't speak English, so it was all in Spanish. And he was like, un qué? And I was like, un popote. And I thought I thought he was making fun of me, like that I had said it wrong or something. And I'm thinking, well, I think that's the word. Isn't that the word? I think yes, it's the word. And I and he was like, un qué? And I'm like, a straw, and then I'm getting upset because I'm thinking he's making fun of me. It was because at that time I wasn't aware yet that Honduran Spanish was different. Yeah. I had never had any experience with it. All my Spanish was Mexican, And I said, well, así lo dicen los mexicanos. And he was like, and of course, Honduran. And he was not happy about that. No soy mexicano. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I appreciated later why that was such a big deal because at the time it was kind of a little, not a good thing. But I always think about that because just the different terminology from two different countries, both in Spanish, two different words. And he was like, if I would have known where I was and where I was going, I would have walked away right then. He was really mad because then I made him feel stupid because I was like, well, that, but we both misunderstood, the motivation of the other and just didn't understand the word. So I think that was an early lesson on being aware, or being like, okay, what do you call this? What do you call it? Because I don't want to say the wrong word. Yeah. So that's been an interesting experience of kind of being completely not Spanish speaking, and learning Mexican Spanish, and then being exposed to the Honduran, and then the Guatemalan.
Guatemala, yeah.
Yeah, it's been very helpful though, because I know a lot of the slang in all three, and that has served me well because, and I know that the benefit is people don't think that I know what they're saying,
And you do.
and it happens all the time.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
So you've experienced that.
Because of course people look at me and they have no clue. But, especially like in a store or something, which nothing crazy has ever happened in a store where they're just randomly talking about me or anything.
Yeah.
But, if I'm sitting at a soccer game or I'm sitting, at a party or a quince or something, and people are talking all around me and have no clue that I
you're
speak Spanish.
understanding.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's what happened to a friend of ours that we know. And he said that there would be girls saying, "Oh, ahí está tu novio," and like tu novio. And he just like laughed. And they were like, "Oh, you understand what we're saying?"
Yeah. They got it. And this day and age too, because like when I started learning Spanish and when I was with my ex boyfriend, my boyfriend when I was like 17, there were times where I was the only white girl in the whole room. We would go to dances, we'd go to Mexican dances. And this is 30 years ago. This is more than that now. We won't go into that, but like more than 30 years about, that's right. And, we would go to Elwood because that was the only place that had Mexican dances. Like we would have to go to Chicago to buy tortilla and, because it just wasn't as normal as it is now. But we would go to Elwood and go to dances, and those were some of the best times of my life. I had so much fun, but it was at a skating rink is where they would have those dances at first, and they'd have a band at the end, and then we were able to, it was a huge dance floor because it was a skating rink.
Yeah.
And, so I would literally be the only white person in the entire place. Now it's not like that, it's way different, but back then it was kind of like that. So yeah, those were some of the best times where I was just kind of learning.
Did you feel awkward? Or did they ever make you feel awkward?
No. Maybe I was just ignorant,
but you liked it.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved the music. I loved learning the language. And if you think about it too, it was like it was kind of different. So they were really nice to me. Like they were really nice to me. And they would teach me the dances, and it was just a nice time. They were very accepting of me, where I didn't always feel accepted in my own culture. So so it was really nice. It was a great time. Except for the one time, well, not except for, but I do remember the first time that I learned that at that time Mexicans would call each other names based on how they look, right?
Oh.
Not like in a bad way, but just kind of
carrilla. They say like se echan carrilla.
Yes. Well, a guy, a friend, like someone that I knew already, at one point he said, I was like walking through, he said, "Pásale, gordita." Well, I didn't know. Like I said, I didn't know at that time that it wasn't always a bad thing. And of course, in white culture, you do not comment. On anybody's physical appearance ever.
Yeah.
Like. Off, you don't ever.
Yeah.
And so he said that thinking I wasn't going to understand him. And I turned around and looked at him and I thought, "What did you just say?" And he just laughed because I understood, but laughed, and then, but that was my first time of being like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then they explained that, it's not always a bad thing. And it's just, because I've always been a bigger girl. So yeah, even when I was 19 years old. And then I realized there was a difference that, at least he said gordita.
Yeah, but there's limits. It's like, you got to have a limit.
And you probably have to know the person better than when I knew that person, because I didn't know him that well, but well enough, and it was fine, and it's whatever. But that was, after that time, like I never took offense, I never took offense when they would call me white girl, basically, and I would never.
Or güerita.
Yeah.
Güerita.
They would never, they never made it a bad thing. I realized it was just that's the way it is, you know?
You want to like experience or
Yeah.
learn more
Yeah.
or know different, not just your
That's right. And
the same.
to be
and-
completely honest, part of it was because I was a bigger girl, and that's just not okay in my culture. And so, but like the guys that I was around, they didn't mind that. They weren't as the Mexican guys, they weren't as judgmental. They weren't as, I don't know. It was just, they were just nice to that. They were nicer to me. And I felt like an actual person, an actual human being, where the boys at my own school weren't paying attention to me in that way. So, yeah, they were really nice.
See how like just with something can impact then like the rest of your life.
Yes. That was like, I never would have imagined when I took Spanish at 15 years old. And the only reason I took it was because that was the only foreign language offered at my school, except for Latin, because I went to a very small school. And so, yeah, I'll take Spanish. Well, I loved it, and I did really well in it. And I had also, got to remember what my son said. Don't say anything you don't want people to know forever. I had also met a boy when I was like 14, Mexican guy, that I thought was just beautiful, just gorgeous, just beautiful, beautiful. And I think that is where my life kind of went, I like Mexican boys.
You shifted.
I guess. I don't really know, but I don't know. It definitely changed things. But then when I started taking Spanish, and then when I went to Mexico with my Spanish class, that really was just like, wow, I really, I just love the culture. I love how welcoming everybody is. And all of a sudden, all of the, I don't know, maybe the pressures that I felt in my own life and my own culture and people, I don't know. I didn't feel that with them. They were very, very accepting and very, very welcoming.
Yeah.
From the beginning of my marriage, we were together for, I don't know, 17 years, something like that. I mean, those differences will come up and bite you when you don't even know it.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean the obvious ones. It's not about food. It's not about language necessarily. It's not about, it's about the things that we are taught that we don't even know that we're taught, and the way that we look at things that we don't even realize how we look at things. And just the way that you're, the way that you're raised, and the things that the circumstances of your upbringing are really, I think, what affect more, regardless of what culture you're from, regardless of what race you are or whatever. It's the circumstances of your upbringing. So for example, my husband grew up in a more poor time, and they didn't have a lot, and it was his people struggle to find employment down there. And I mean, his dad was not able to find employment for a long time while he was growing up, and just lots of different things. That the way that he was raised in Honduras, not anything bad, but just the way that his life was, and then the way that I was raised, and I was raised, as a middle class, lower middle class, probably family, depending on the time of my life. There were some low times, but I was raised without. If I was lacking anything, if we didn't have something, I don't remember that being a problem. If that makes sense. Like I didn't have any of the nice new clothes or shoes that other people had. And yes, I was a kid. I was envious of, I wish I could have those and this and that. So we definitely weren't rich by any means, but I was very privileged just to have the basics, And so those kinds of things, and just even Christmas is an example where, for him, Christmas isn't about buying hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of presents. It's about celebrating with a meal with your family, Christmas Eve, and it's not about the presents. Whereas here, it's a big deal, or Santa Claus, those kinds of things where, and was insistent. I'm like, well, if we're going to be raising him in the U.S., then he's not going to be the kid that's going to school telling everybody that Santa Claus doesn't exist. Like, we're going along with this, and he's going to know who Santa is, and then he'll find out on,
Yeah.
So those kinds of things were kind of those things that creep in to your relationship that, when you're raised similarly, when you speak the same language, when you're from the same culture, marriage is hard enough.
Yeah.
But when you have lots of differences and you have these big gaps in kind of how you see the world, it's really hard. On top of that, just our personalities were way different. I'm a very strong, stubborn, controlling personality, and he's a strong personality too, but he's more likely to keep the peace. He's the one that wants for everything to be okay, and whatever you want and whatever makes you happy and all that. But that wasn't quite working out either. Like, it just wasn't very balanced in that way. So it's rough. It's rough because, like I said, relationships and marriage are hard enough.
I know.
But then to throw in all those other differences,
things. Yeah.
I think I'll just be alone for the rest of my life because it's too complicated.
No, but it's like because I feel that same way sometimes. Like, we're like, I want to talk about it, but I want you to know how I feel, but I want you to understand like how you make me feel. But and then the other person might
Doesn't
not
want
want
to talk
to.
about it.
And okay, just be quiet. And it's like, but why?
Or
But-
yes, we're gonna fix this right now.
Right now. Yeah.
And that's exactly how I was. That's exactly how I'm like, no, we need to talk this out and we need to fix it. And not realizing that it's not always the time to do that. Like, I was the one that probably needed to back off, walk away, take a breath, and then come back to it with a more level head, So,
But it's hard sometimes.
It's hard, especially like my mom was a very strong-willed, independent person who was like, I'm going to do what I want to do and nobody's going to tell me any different.
Yeah.
And so I have realized as I've grown older that, I'm not like her in a lot of ways, but I really am like she was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you want to change that? Or are you okay with just...
I think I would want to change it.
Yeah.
I think that being that strong-willed and being that stubborn sometimes has definitely caused me problems. I think it's helped me in a lot of ways as well. Because like my sister, she was completely opposite. She was very passive and quiet and calm and peaceful. And I was like, all the time, and so I don't know. I feel like a mix of the two of us would have been good.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to be more like her. She was more like my dad. My dad was really calm and quiet and laid back and had like this quiet strength. And my mom wasn't like that at all. So yeah, I would have liked to have gotten more of my dad's calm vibe. Mm-hmm.
But would you think that you can make some changes now? Or do you think it's like, it's impossible?
I am literally in the middle of that dilemma right now because I have to make some changes because I don't want to be, because along with that personality comes a lot of stress and a lot of angst and a lot of frustration, and I don't want that. I want to be at peace. I want to be calm, and I want to just, I think I have to just let it go.
Let it go.
Let people do what they're going to do. I think now that my son is older as well, and he's learning to do those things on his own, like I can, if he was supposed to go to this soccer game today and ended up not going because it got canceled. And, growing up, I was the one that had the communication with the people that run the team. And I always knew what was going on. And I was the one, okay, well, if we're going to have to be there at 2:00, then we have to do this and this and this first. And we have to make sure we feed the animals and blah, blah. I was always the one having to manage all of that. Well, now, as of like, I don't know, 11:00 this morning or 10:00, he hadn't heard. They had sent a message. He didn't see it. He hadn't heard when they're leaving today. And I'm sitting here like, I need to know what time, what your plans are. I need to know what time you're leaving. I need to know but I'm really like, okay, you know what? Technically, I don't need to know. And I'm not going to reach out and ask myself. I was this close to being like, okay, I haven't heard anything and he's not telling me anything. And when are you guys leaving? And but I thought, no. I asked him, I have asked him like 3 times. Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? What time are you leaving on Saturday? What time are you leaving on Saturday? I don't know. Haven't heard. And finally I was like, you know what? If he doesn't hear, if he's not going to take the initiative to reach out on his own, then that's on him.
Yeah.
And he can deal with whatever consequences those are. Meaning if he misses the bus and he's not on that bus and he doesn't get to go play, that's on him.
Yeah.
And if I can make myself sit back and actively think that way and be like, let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go. I know if my ex-husband were listening to this, he would just think I'm hilarious because he probably wishes I would have thought of this 15 years ago. Yeah. Because it's really that's what I've needed to do for a long time.
Yeah.
I need to let it go. I've caused myself a lot of stress, everyone else a lot of stress. I have not always treated people well because I have been so overbearing and not even realizing it. And I don't want to do that anymore. Don't want to do that anymore. I want to let it go.
Let it go.
Be at peace. If it's not affecting me or if it's not affecting someone I love or if it's, then I have to let it go.
Because that's also stress for you.
Exactly. And I never saw it that way either all this time. It's almost like I thought that was what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to manage everything so that other people didn't have to. I was supposed to, especially as a mom, we manage, doctor's appointments and schools and appointments. I mean, just everything.
Take care of everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And I feel like, especially for the last probably 20 years, it's all been on me. I have had to make these, if I really think back from the moment that my husband was picked up and then got deported, he was in the U.S. for 2 months in jail before they deported him, waiting for paperwork. They lost his passport. So I'm, calling the embassy. I'm calling everybody. I'm calling immigration. I'm driving all around. I'm going to visit him 4 hours away. I'm just paying the lawyer. I'm dealing with all the immigration paperwork. I'm just everything.
You were taking care of
everything. And I think, from even before that, probably in 2003, my mom passed away and I was the executor of her estate. She didn't have a ton, but she had some land. She had a house. She had a car. She had personal belongings. And I had to take care of all of that.
And you were in Guatemala?
I was not then.
Okay,
no.
okay.
Yeah. This is before any of that happened.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like that was where my whole life changed when she passed because I had to take care of her estate. I didn't take the time to mourn her death. I didn't take time to really understand what was going on and how I felt about everything. And I, just from that moment, I had to take care of everything and I had to, and we're talking from 2003 and then, to 2000, I met my husband in 2005. And then by 2007, we get pregnant.
Son,
we got pregnant. Then he got deported. Then I'm traveling to Honduras, multiple times. And just it's almost like ever since the moment that my mom died, it's been chaos in my brain just because I've had to take care of so many different things and so many things on my mind and had to take care of her estate. And that took a long time. And my brother was only 18 at the time. I have a little brother and, he needed help too. He needed, he was just getting ready to graduate from college. He was, just graduating from high school. So she didn't get to see his high school graduation. Then he needed to get his stuff all ready for college. So I helped him do all those things. And I was just kind of stepped in as the mother figure in that way. He had his dad, but, and they were, and my mom, they were actually on spring break, my brother's spring break, his high school spring break in Mexico. They were in Cozumel. She was in Cozumel. He was in Cancun, and she died there.
Oh, really?
She had she was on like a rented moped motorcycle thingy. So like not motorcycle, but not like the little mopeds, but like the bigger ones that can go 50 or 60 or whatever.
Okay.
And she had an accident. She went to Cozumel for the day on her own and just to go explore. And she rented the motorbike or whatever. And she had an accident and ended up dying there. Yeah. So I think the circumstances of her death also were what just kind of, you know, it was, and I was the only one that spoke Spanish, so I had to be the one to communicate with with anything that happened. I mean, luckily the embassy would communicate with us, and they of course spoke English because the U.S. embassy in Mexico, they were very helpful, and they were the ones that tracked us down in the first place, and so ever since that, I mean, it was 2 weeks before I could even get her body back. It was a lot of red tape and a lot of money and. They were
crazy.
saying
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. It was pretty traumatic, just and she was only 53 years old, so she was in the prime of her older adult life. She had quite a zest for life though, so I always say that, well, at least she was doing something she loved. Like she used to ride a motorcycle when she was younger.
Yeah.
And so ever since that happened, it just like kind of, I always say
changed.
it just shattered my mind into like a million pieces that never put themselves back. And I've struggled ever since.
Wow.
Like just kind of mentally and a lot of emotionally. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I forget how I got there.
I would have never.
Yeah. It's crazy because people don't think about that.
Like you go on vacation and you don't know what can happen.
Mm-hmm. And it was extra traumatic because the Mexican authorities were blaming the accident on her. So they would not release the first problem was it was on Cozumel. And in Cozumel, you cannot get a helicopter there for lifeline rescue. You can't get a helicopter there after certain hours because the airport's closed.
Wow.
So she already had to stay in some small clinic there on Cozumel. And then even the next day, even if she had still been alive, because she didn't make it throughout the night, but even if she had still been alive, they weren't going to let her go because they wanted to hold her responsible for the accident. So no matter what, they weren't going to let her go, even if she had lived. So we couldn't get her the life-saving surgeries that she needed. We couldn't get her any of the help.
But what if the motorcycle had something wrong or
they didn't know any of that. They didn't they only knew the basic circumstances of the accident, and I'm sure witnesses probably told them what happened. I'm sure they had some information, but they wanted to hold her responsible and they were not going to let her go. So even if I had been able to get a Lifeline helicopter down there, that was going to be $25,000. They wouldn't
let her go.
Wouldn't let her go. Yeah, the embassy told me, they said, do not come down here because if you come down here, they will hold you until you pay whatever they think you should pay.
Wow.
So we had to just let her be there until they were willing to release her body.
Or like figure out.
Yeah, the logistics of getting her back and, none of us being there and yeah.
I can imagine
yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Because then you want to run out there.
Oh, I was ready to be on the next plane.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question, but especially it happened. It happened at I think 4 p.m. And then I didn't hear about it until 10 p.m. And then they called at 4 or 5 in the morning and said that she had passed. So I truly believe that she could have survived if she had received better medical care immediately,
Oh, yeah.
But it just, the circumstances.
So you couldn't also contact her while she was in that clinic?
She
there was no way
she was
to-
in a coma. She was
Oh, okay.
she was not even
okay.
awake.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So she never regained consciousness after the accident.
After the accident. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, that was pretty much it. And then it took about 2 weeks to get her back. And then we were able to have the funeral, like
Yeah.
it was already, we had already been through a lot at that point, at least I had, cause I had to deal with it all. But, cause I wasn't the oldest sibling, but my sister was the oldest sibling. She had passed away 2 years before that. So I was the only one that could, and then my brother was 18. So
it was just
it was just me. Yeah. I think that's where it started.
Okay.
I think that when my mom died and I had to take care of all of that from the moment that I found out and, having to get her back and having all of a sudden I was
in charge
by myself. Yeah. Because my sister was gone. My parents were divorced, had been divorced a long time. So it was just me. Like I could only rely on myself. Like I was married at the time. I had an ex-husband, ex. I was married before, and he was great and very supportive. But it was still just me. It was still. So I had to then take care of my brother and take care of all my mom's stuff and all the things that came along with that. And so I think from that point forward, it was kind of like, well, you just get it done. You pick yourself up, you get it done. What's next? What do I need to do next? What's the next thing? What do I need to be doing? I got to be productive. I got to do this and that. That's where I think the strong personality helped because I just kind of hit it head on and this is what you have to do. But I know now that I never took the time to mourn properly.
Yeah.
I expected a lot from myself. I never stopped to be like, whoa, what do I want from life and where do I want to go from here? I just kind of let it flow and went along with it. And, but I think I'm kind of paying for that now. I feel like things have kind of caught up with me and to where now, so now I just want some peace, now that and I think too, raising a child and the constant back and forth of having younger kids. Also was a distraction. Because it was like, well, I have to take care of this human being. I'm the one who's going to make sure that he's okay and this and that. And, and the whole, literally my mom died in 2003. I got pregnant in 2007. Husband got deported, moved to Costa Rica.
So
like
it's
2.5
just like
years
a nonstop.
One thing after another, one thing after another. Yeah, I think I felt the most at peace, except I didn't because I probably didn't appreciate it. But I think I did feel the most at peace in Guatemala because it just was what it was. And I didn't, and it was so nice to not have to, this may sound silly, but I didn't have to worry about like life insurance and health insurance and all these other, like,
I know.
I walked to work. I went to work. Life was simple. It was calm. It was nice.
And it was free. Like you were just, it was,
even though I worked
free.
a ton of hours, but it was just, I worked a ton. We always joke that when we went to Guatemala, I was working without papers, long hours, low pay, no benefits. So we used to joke with my husband because, he came to the country without papers. And so we had switched roles. I was all of a sudden working illegally in Guatemala.
Yeah.
And, I worked a ton and he took care of the baby and he did have he would coach soccer here and there and he would do other odd jobs. But I mean, we couldn't really do anything else. I was working a ton, my shift was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. technically with a 2-hour break in the middle, like a lunch break, but I rarely took all of that time. So I worked a ton and it's just always been go, go, go.
Yeah.
Just go, go, go.
Yeah.
And then we came back to the States and I felt the same pressure that I felt before being in the States of just,
I know,
a lot of.
And it's like a clock. You're just going again and again and again.
And then just, they call it the rat race, right? Where you're just constantly just kind of going along with daily life. And I haven't ever really learned to relax and try to have fun and not take life so seriously and just be carefree and
Yeah.
But I've never really felt like I can do that, you know?
You should plan a trip.
Yeah. I believe me, I do want to travel. Like I have a lot of things I want to do. It's been weird because like in the last, especially the last few months, like I think ever since my son got his license, mostly it has been like, whoa, what am I doing? Who am I? What,
Yeah.
you know, my identity has been him for so long that now I'm just like, what the heck do I do? You know, now I'm too old to go out and
Now, what's
clubbing.
next?
Like I want to go do the things I should have done 20 years ago, but I can't really do that either.
It's not. It's never too late.
It is too late. I'm old, and nothing will make you feel old by like being around a bunch of young people. I tell you that.
But you just have to find the right places.
Maybe I need to go to like retirement places, so then I'm the young one. Then I won't feel so old.
I just feel like it's never too late.
It's never too late, but it's definitely too late for
Other things.
Yeah. Maybe things that you kind of wish you had done, you know, when you were younger. I wish I had partied more in college. I wish that I had made plans. I wish that I had done so many things, you know, but I was always afraid.
Yeah.
Still afraid to die.
Overthink things.
Yes.
I think we overthink.
Sure. For sure.
Overthinkers, yeah.
But I think in the future, I definitely I need to get in shape better because if I'm going to travel, like traveling is hard, you know, like you do a lot of walking, you do a lot of, you know, things.
Yeah.
And I want to feel better. I want to, you know, be stronger. I want to be able to go and walk the hills of Italy or something, you know, I definitely have those thoughts in my head, but I don't know. The older I get, the more I like my couch. Like I'm really struggling to just get those thoughts together of like, oh, I'd really like to do that, but ooh, do I really want to? Because just the thought of like
Getting up.
well, I can handle that. The thought of like, gosh, when you travel, like just getting to the freaking airport.
The chaos. Yeah.
Getting to the airport, making sure you're on time, packing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Just packing and making sure you have everything, you know? I don't know if I want to do that.
If you want it, yeah.
I want to, but it's a lot, you know, especially if you're going overseas or.
Yeah.
I want to. I really do. I just have to get myself there mentally of feeling like, okay, it's worth the trouble.
Yeah.
That's what, you know, I want to go to Japan. My college roommate is from Japan. She still lives there and she's half Japanese, half American. And I want to go see her. And I have things I want to do. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, but the plane ride is like 12 hours.
I know that plane is kind of far.
Yeah. But like my brother's wife, she's from Poland and I would love to go to Poland someday. And they have a baby now. So my little niece is half Polish and she's going to speak Polish and I'm not going to know what she's saying. And I don't like that. So I need to learn Polish.
Yeah.
And I have things I need to do. But what do? Sit on my couch and watch Hallmark or what have I been watching? Dateline, you know, murder stories, that kind of thing. So yeah.
I think you'll find the right time.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. I think that
You'll find the right time and you're just going to be like, okay,
I have to
I'm
just
going
go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And getting myself kind of over that hump of like, you know what? Who cares what people think?
Yeah.
And
Just do it.
just do it. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big change.
Yeah.
You know? And when you're in the daily
Routine.
of, especially when your kids are little, when they're in school, we're in this, you know, he'll be graduating like next school year.
Yeah.
And neither one of us is excited for that. He doesn't want to either. He's not ready. But then what?
Then
What if he really leaves the house and if he's not living in my house anymore? What the heck? But then I have all my animals, so I've definitely got things to take care of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm at a weird stage because I'm not raising a younger kid. I'm not, you know, he's more independent. He can drive. It's a weird place to be.
I know.
I don't like it.
That's when you're like, okay, oh, like you said, what do I do next?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's next? And it's
What do you even do with yourself?
there's nothing there. There's probably a lot next, but
I can't see it.
you don't see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see it. I don't, things pop into my head. I think, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. Or, I would even love to go back to Guatemala and find a job down there and live, because especially now that I don't have a little kid and I can, I don't have to worry about like safety and schooling or anything like that. I can just do my own thing.
Yeah.
And, because actually I took Ian back to Guatemala, this past June. Of this year. It's the first time he's been back since we left. So he doesn't remember a lot.
Oh,
because he was only
he
barely
was
5 years
little.
old. Yeah. And I tell you what, walking back there and just walking down the streets and it just felt like I walked right back into home.
Yeah.
It really did. There were a lot of changes, lots of different businesses and stuff, but some of the old businesses were all still there. The same people. I literally ran into somebody in the street that I knew that yelled my name from across the street. Like, it felt like home.
Yeah.
And I could see myself doing it again.
Yeah.
Or maybe going to somewhere else or, and staying and working and, even if it's a few months or even if it's, I feel like, speaking Spanish also really helps. Yeah. It opens up my whole world. Mm-hmm. Like I can go to so many places and I'm not going to understand everything and they're going to talk differently. Like I don't know if I can make it in the Dominican Republic
or Colombia.
See, I don't have a lot of experience with no, but any place that is kind of way different than what I'm used to. I just Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and those are the even Argentinian, the Argentinian accent, those are also I'm like oh, very different, I mean I try and I make my way through, but I'm also not shy about saying I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You need to speak the whole word or something. I don't
or slow down because sometimes I feel like when I speak in Spanish, I'm like it goes so fast.
But it's not really.
But it just
is what
it sounds that way.
Yes.
It sounds that way, and people do also tell me like,
"Oh, you talk fast.
You're talking too fast. Can you repeat it?"
Even in Spanish?
They're trying to understand what I'm saying.
So like Spanish speakers or English?
English.
Oh, okay.
They're trying to like understand or learn what I'm saying or like pay attention. And they're like, "Wait, what? Slow down. Can you say it slower?" And then when I say it like slowly, they're like, "Oh, I understand what you're saying."
Have you ever been, well, obviously you've been in California.
Yeah.
So you've been in an area where everything is bilingual.
Yeah.
I went to the south of Texas down to the valley for a spring break one time with a friend who was Texan. And she, we went to I always get this wrong. A Whataburger, I think is so like In-N-Out burger, but like Whataburger down in the, and we went to this restaurant and just being with these people, it was like, I met this one friend and then, she has like a bunch of siblings and they all spoke half and half, like when you get with someone probably from California or someone that's, you probably just, you go back and forth or whatever, and that's how they spoke. And it was when I was first like learning Spanish and I was like, you have got to choose one because I cannot
do both.
They would literally switch in the middle, and now it's no problem. But at first I was like, you got to choose one. I can't do both at the same time. Like I can do Spanish pretty well at that time. Yeah. Obviously English, but, and I'll never forget when we went to Whataburger once, we went through like the drive-through or whatever, brought it home, but the girl lived like 20 minutes outside of town. So it wasn't a short trip. And they got something wrong on the order. And I'll never forget. She calls up the Whataburger and just starts speaking Spanish, and then English and just whatever came to her, that's what she spoke, right? And I'm like, she didn't even think twice about whether or not the person on the other end of the line spoke English or Spanish. She just assumed, which is a safe assumption. She knows what she's doing. You know what I mean? She knows her area. But I will never forget that as an English speaking, just learning Spanish, trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, they completely function in both.
And that's how I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I am sometimes even with friends that I know that speak in both languages. I'm like
Yeah.
saying something in English and then I go to Spanish and then I go back.
Yes.
I don't
You
know.
almost did it a minute ago.
I know. But like sometimes I translate at work. I translate a lot.
Gosh. Yeah.
So when I have to translate, I get home with headaches
Oh, yeah.
because I have to translate like parent conferences. And it's like
So you have to
one
think.
back, and it's like there's no gap in between. Like you're just translating conference after conference after
Yes.
conference, and it's like, can I get a break? And I need water. I'm like, can I get water? Because like I'm just like,
It's
and
a
so
lot.
my brain is going. What I do is, so the teacher is saying whatever she needs to say to the parent in English. So when she's saying it to me in English, I'm writing it in Spanish.
Oh.
So then I say it to the mom in Spanish.
Okay.
And then when the mom tells me in Spanish, then I write it in English and then say it to the teacher in English. So that's how I found like easier way for me to translate. Because at first I would try to like just suck it all in, and then I'm like, okay, she said this, but it's like, no,
Not even close.
not even close. I missed a few things in there. I forgot. Okay, so then I'm like, okay, wait, what was that again?
That is so funny because it's so true. It's
Yeah.
so true. Something that I've also experienced is, so one time I was in a meeting at work and I was translating between an English speaking lawyer asking the questions, and then there was the person that was answering and was in Spanish. So I translated whatever it was, and I said it to the person in Spanish, and he told me his answer, whatever. I turned to the English speaker, and instead of translating it into English, I just started telling him in Spanish.
Yeah.
Like, this is what he said, and they're looking at me like, luckily, I had a friend in there who was training at our job as well, and she was in there, and she goes, English. Like she realized what was going on because she realized that I just kind of turned and started
And
speaking
said
in
it,
Spanish
yeah.
because in my head at that moment, it didn't sound any different.
Yeah.
I thought I was telling them what they needed to hear, but it was, well, clearly I'm saying this, but it was in
Yeah.
Spanish and they had no idea what I was talking about. So I kind of get myself caught up. So I think that's really interesting how you do that, because when you're writing it, you're more likely to, if you're writing in English, more likely to say it to the person in English instead of, having
So
to.
that's how that's a
great idea.
I've learned.
I wonder though, I don't know, in my experience at least, it's much easier to receive it and understand it, but producing it is a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother thing because being able to produce it, like, I can read a newspaper. I can listen to the news. I can listen to a speech. I'm not going to get all of it necessarily, especially if it's highly technical or like all academic or something. But I can understand way more than I could ever produce. Still, have you heard that or seen some of those videos where a guy says, he's like, "Oh, you want me to speak Spanish? Oh, do you want to do like $1 Spanish, $2, or like whatever you're willing to pay me the extra on the hour, I'll give you that." And it was, the lowest is like, "Sí, hablo español." You know what I mean? And then he's like, "Oh, you want to pay me $3? Okay." And then he blah, 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 speaks his fluent Spanish. And but it's kind of a good representation on the fact that it's a valuable skill. It's something that no one can ever take from you. And, and like I said, it just opens up your world to so many people and so many, I've been in situations where, especially with me, because I don't look like I speak Spanish. So if it comes up and if someone realizes, especially if they're struggling to try to communicate something, I won't just instantly go into Spanish, because that's like saying, well, my Spanish is better than your English. So I'm just going to no, that's kind of rude. And I don't want to assume, but if I can tell that they're struggling, and if I can tell, I might just say, we can speak in Spanish if you would prefer. Yeah. And a lot of the times when, they're just like, oh, thank goodness, and you just see that relief on their faces, and it's nice, because it allows them to feel more comfortable as well. Yeah. But there aren't a lot of times that those things happen. I know. Half the time I will tell you, I had a yard sale this summer at the house, and there were times when people would come up, like if it's a couple and they were speaking in Spanish, I told them in Spanish, I just said, hey, I just want you to know that I speak Spanish, because I don't feel like it's fair that you might be talking, looking at me, thinking you're having a private conversation.
Yeah.
And you're not. So if you're going to criticize my stuff, don't do it in Spanish around me, because
Or if you want to make a deal.
That's right.
You got to know that I'm understanding.
Don't be talking amongst yourselves and acting like you're pulling one over on me,
Yeah.
So yeah, and they were like, oh, thank you for telling us, I'm like, yeah, I just, I felt like it just...
Before you say anything that you shouldn't.
I just thought it was nice. I don't know. I just felt like, because I felt like, I don't know. I try not to be deceitful, and I didn't want it to be like, it turned into anything negative or anything, and I didn't want to embarrass anyone. I wanted them to feel comfortable, but it helped.
Yeah.
I mean, it also helped because then they were able to ask questions or, offer me different, amount of money or whatever it was. So, I've always joked we should all have to walk around
with a tag.
A tag that says I speak English and
hablo
Spanish.
español.
That's right. Or, because people they don't know.
Yeah.
And, it's like, hey, warning, this, don't say bad things about me.
Well, thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you for
you.
coming, and
It's been fun.
I hope it's not the last time.
No, I'd love to come back. That'd be great.
Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and comment. And this was another episode of Why Not Podcast. Thank you.